This is every single fight to make next after UFC Fight Night Tampa Covington versus Buckley. I've got all of the key fighters from that card on the screen right now. Some winners, some losers, and you may notice there is an empty box next to all of them, and that's where their next opponent's going to go, who I have hidden around the perimeter of the screen. I'll slowly reveal those opponents one by one as the video goes on and place them where they belong on the screen. Let's start straight away with the main event. Joaquin Buckley puts a whooping on Colby Covington. Now, there were some moments where you were like, oh, hang on a second, Colby might have a bit of success here. He's finally got the takedown. But then Buckley would stay calm, composed, get back up. It was a 3-0 sweep, in my opinion, to Joaquin Buckley. Now, I've seen a lot of people online saying, a lot of wrestlers that are UFC fighters online saying, Colby got that round. Dude, it's damage-based scoring. If Colby's doing nothing on top position but like hold half guard for a minute and a half and do not much with it, then you're going to have to give it to Buckley, who's been landing great shots on the feet and doing the more damage and landing the more damaging blows. Either way, Joaquin Buckley, Colby Covington. Buckley can make a quick turnaround here. Buckley's very active in general. He made some call-outs on the microphone afterwards. And he said, I can't remember who the first name was. I think he might have mentioned... God, I can't even remember what the first name was. But the second two names were Kamaru Usman and then Bilal Muhammad. And the loudest cheer was for Kamaru Usman. He may have actually mentioned Leon Edwards himself, who I think is going to be his next opponent, because Sean Brady allegedly leaked that JDM versus Usman was already sort of agreed upon for UFC in February in the Sydney card. I think it's UFC 312. Apparently, I've been told Sean Brady accidentally said on a podcast or something that JDM versus Usman is all but done for an Australia card, because he was looking for either one of those names and he couldn't get either one of those names to fight him. So he was saying that he's been told that that matchup is getting made for the February card in Australia. So Joaquin Buckley's call out of Usman may not come to fruition yet. Maybe he'll end up fighting him down the line. Who knows? But I reckon we're going to see Joaquin Buckley versus Leon Edwards, who I think he did say the name of first as one of his three opponents that he was looking to fight. I think scheduling-wise, it makes sense. Leon Edwards is coming back in March for the London card. Joaquin Buckley. What's a 3-month turnaround to Joaquin Buckley? Which is probably going to end up being more of like a 4-month turnaround, really. But either way, what's a 3-month turnaround to Joaquin Buckley? That's nothing for Buckley, dude. He's going to be back in there. I reckon he'll be looking to fight Edwards, and it'll be a main event of a fight night card. Maybe it'll be a co-main event if Pimlet is on there against a high-ranking lightweight. I'm starting to feel more and more, maybe this won't happen in London, but I'm starting to feel more and more that we're going to be seeing a Pimlet versus like a Dustin Poirier or something along those lines, and then a Gaethje versus a Dan Hooker, and then an Oliveira versus who knows, and maybe he's a backup opponent for the UFC 311 card. We'll see what goes on, but I reckon the welterweight matchmaking should be as follows. Joaquin Buckley versus Leon Edwards. That'll get him towards the title shot that he wants. That's a title elimination bout for Joaquin Buckley. If Edwards wins, again, I think you should have to be on a win streak to fight for a title. I think that should be mandatory of at least 2. So I don't think Edwards would get a title shot if he wins this one. But Joaquin Buckley versus Leon Edwards, good matchup. And then for the rest of the welterweight division, as I just said, they've got Usman versus JDM allegedly in the works. I reckon we're going to see Sean Brady versus Carlos Prates, just because Brady is like the top-ranked contender with the least negotiating power, because he's not as big of a name. So he kind of has to do what he's told a little bit more than the others. And I think that leaves out Colby Covington versus Ian Gary. I reckon that's what happens. Colby Covington, Ian Gary, both guys coming off losses. Now listen, for Colby Covington, let's talk about his future here, because he's going to have the narrative that he wants, if you know what I'm saying. In hindsight, I was screaming about the stoppage, but if you're Colby and you're a Colby Covington fan, if he would have just went on for the next 2 rounds and lost both of those rounds, or maybe in an ideal world for Covington fans, you could imagine that maybe he would go on and have a final stand in the 5th round where he had a moment of success and it throws the whole thing into some doubt, you know what I mean? But I think this is good for Colby Covington. He didn't get flatline KO'd. He didn't get TKO'd. The fight got called off to a cut. Very good for Buckley, because he got his win and there's no denying it. Like, Joaquin Buckley beat up on Colby Covington in the fight. He's the winner. But for Colby Covington, this... It was a cut. I just see it now. It was a cut. They stopped it. I was just starting to get in there. You know, I hadn't been in there for a while, and I was a little bit shaky in the early rounds, but then I started to really get into my flow state, and then the cut got the fight stopped. It should never have been stopped. I can already hear it. So that's actually a good thing for Colby Covington if he is going to continue fighting in the welterweight division, in the UFC in general. I think that's pretty good. It gives him that narrative that he can use. Like, I was doing well, I started to do well in the third round because it was maybe his most successful round and it got stopped to a cut. BS. I reckon you should do Colby Covington versus Ian Garry, mainly because of the timing of it. In my opinion, you got Ian Garry just fought Shavkat Rakhmonov, went 5 rounds. He's a younger dude. He's probably going to want to improve for a bit and take some time. Not too much, but I reckon we could be seeing a UFC pay-per-view in America in April or May. And we could very well see this on the main card somewhere. So I would do Colby Covington versus Ian Garry and Joaquin Buckley versus Leon Edwards. Sean Brady says Usman JDM. And I reckon Brady's going to get Carlos Prates or a guy who's coming up. And then maybe that we'll see like a Gilbert Burns versus a Jeff Neal. That's how I would match up the welterweight division. So I think these two matchups are very likely to happen next. We move on to the co-main event. Cub Swanson got a big win over Billy Quarantillo. And this is what I think should be next for him. Edson Barboza. Now, I believe Edson Barboza has a fight against Steve Garcia coming up in February. I think it's at the start of February, one of the earlier cards in the year. I think it's like the third card back after the break that they're going to have. And he's fighting Steve Garcia. I think he's going to lose because Steve Garcia can grapple offensively. He's very powerful on the feet. And he's starting, even though I thought he was quite mid to start his career, he's actually becoming a bit of a prospect himself. So I would go against Edson. He could win it, of course. He's a little more physical, and he has a physicality advantage over some in the featherweight division. But I would go with Steve Garcia to mix up takedowns and make it just a really bad night for Edson Barboza. But after that, these are the matchups I want for Cub Swanson. He didn't retire. He got a nasty KO. I don't need to see Cub Swanson like, oh, Gene Silva needs a matchup. Nobody's trying to, you know what I mean? We don't need that. We don't need Cub Swanson testing himself out against an up-and-coming prospect in the featherweight division. You could make a really fun matchup in London against a Nathaniel Wood if you wanted to put him against another prospect or a younger fighter who's not a legend like him. But I think legends, after they've taken on a few prospects, they deserve a legend-on-legend matchup. And I think Cub Swanson, Edson Barboza would be a great addition to any fight night card with a crowd in the co-main event, in the feature fight, whatever it would be. Not quite main event, not quite main card of a pay-per-view. High up on the prelims of a pay-per-view. Co-main event or a feature fight of a fight night, crowded arena card. Don't you ever put legends in the fucking Apex. We shouldn't even be having the Apex. And UFC Tampa's proof of that. Could you imagine if all of those results happened and they were in the Apex? Thank God it was in a crowded arena. I hate the Apex, but Cub Swanson, Edson Barboza, middle of next year. Cub's in no rush. Edson's fighting in February, July, an international fight week, crowded arena fight night card. This would look very nice on the main card of one of those. So, Cub Swanson, Edson Barboza is a good matchup. Manel Kape called for his title shot. Had the performance of a lifetime against Bruno Silva. However, it was against Bruno Silva. So you have to take it where, okay, he's not schooling a top 5 guy in the flyweight division, but still, that was the best Manel Kape we've ever seen. He looked amazing in that fight. And there is a narrative to say that, listen, Alejandro Pantoja's making pretty easy. Well, he isn't making easy work. I'm going to be real. A lot of people view Alejandro Pantoja. He beats Kai Asakura easily. And I've seen a lot of narratives like he's just dominating the division. And I'm like, The last Pantoja-Moreno fight could have gone either way. Very, very close fight. I thought it went to Pantoja, and it did. Pantoja versus Erceg. That was a lower-ranked guy who's just lost to Kai Kara France. You know, I thought that Erceg won that fight very, very closely. I'm not going to scream robbery watching it back in hindsight, but I did at the time. But yeah, I don't think he's like untouchable as a champion. It's just he's beating them. He's beaten all of these guys, and he's beaten Manel Kape in a very competitive 29-28 decision where he outstruck Manel Kape in the fight. It's not like he could do what he wanted in the grappling to Manel Kape and just destroy him and ragdoll him or anything like that. So I think Manel Kape, if he has improved over the few years more than Pantoja has, he could be a real threat. but he needs to face Kai Kara-France first. He called him out on the microphone. We know there's beef between him and Team CKB. Even Adesanya's getting called out on the mic afterwards. I would have pulled Adesanya's face out, but I don't want to have Adesanya get fed to the wolves like that. You know what I mean? He's safer fighting Nassourdine Imavov. We don't want Manel Kape, we got to have Adesanya have a future in this sport. We don't want to just feed him to Manel Kape and have Kape destroy him like we know you would. We got to have Manel Kape versus Kai Kara-France. This is the matchup. They've got bad blood. Manel Kape has opinions about him that aren't safe for YouTube administration teams and ESPN alongside each other. But Manel Kape's got some very strong opinions of him. It would be a great build-up. Get them on the main card of a pay-per-view. This could be in February on the Australia card because, of course, Kai Kara-France is from that region of the world. And Manel Kape is known in that region of the world because that was the last time. He actually called out Kai Kara-France in front of the Australian crowd. So, if Kape wants to stay active, I know he's Muslim now, so hey, Christmas holidays it's not really a big burden for him. You know what I mean? He's not going to, I don't know how it works, but you know what I'm saying. Maybe February could be a quick turnaround for Manel Kape. He looks healthy. He looks uninjured. Maybe his groin's aching him because Bruno Silva hit him in the groin about 3 times. But Manel Kape, Kai Kara-France on the Australia card in February. The Australian fans that were in attendance on the last Australia pay-per-view of, I think it was Strickland Adesanya, will know about this matchup. They'll be amped and they'll know about the storyline of this. They'll know it's a grudge match. They'll remember that's the guy that was on the last card that called out Kara-France and shouted at him in the crowd and dropped the word. Say it again, Kape. Say it again, Radke. Either way, though, that's the matchup I would make. Or you can give it its own spotlight. It could be an Apex main event in a week if it had a strong enough undercard. But no, got to be on a pay-per-view. Got to be on a main card. Because you want to build some life into the flyweight division, and the winner of this can take on Pantoja, who, in my opinion, in the meantime, should be taking on the rematch with Davis and Figueiredo. A lot of people are saying stuff like, Figueiredo needs to come off a win first, and I know I just said that I need you to be on a win streak to fight for a title, but we're in very dire situations here. This isn't a division where there's an abundance of contenders like there is in the welterweight division right now. We're in a situation right now, okay? So we need to fix it, and if you're not going to be coming off a win, at least have a win over the guy that's the champion, and let that be the narrative, because I don't think Figueiredo's stock dropped after his Yan performance. I thought he had a good fight. Even though he lost, he had a great scrap with Peter Yan. And I think Figueiredo, before that, he put in great work at Bantamweight that he really shouldn't have had to, but, that serves him right, not being, having the surname of Nurmagomedov. Then he would have just had to have beaten one opponent and then got a title shot. But that's his fault. You know what I'm saying? Silly him. I think Davis and Figueiredo, Alejandro Pantoja 2, Manel Kape, Kai Kara-France 2. Winners take on each other. If Figueiredo gets the belt, he'll probably retire. I don't see him wanting to stick around in the flyweight division, but yeah, I don't know what Royval's going to do, but Pantoja's 2-0 up against you. You're going to have to win a few in a row. This is like Whittaker being 0-2 against Izzy. He had to get like 3 in a row. Whittaker had to get like 2 in a row before he even got the Israel Adesanya rematch. Maybe even 3 in a row, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember the order of the fights, but I'm fairly certain Whittaker had to go through like 3 opponents or at least 2 opponents before he got that rematch. So why are we acting like Royval is so undeniable when he's 0-2 against a champ? Another one. No harm in taking another one. I don't know who it's going to be against, but I'm sure there'll be someone. You know what I mean? Asu Almabayev versus Brandon Royval probably is going to be the most likely matchup to be made. But this is what I want to see. Manel Kape, Kai Kara-France on that Australia pay-per-view. Or put him on the Saudi card so he can be at another press conference with Adesanya again. That'd be pretty cool. Either way, Dustin Jacoby. Yeah. Dustin Jacoby. Great win over Vitor Petrino. Coming off a win. Big things moving forward. Not really, though. He's got to put a few together first. But I always thought Dustin Jacoby was higher ranked than he was. Not that I didn't know where he was ranked, but I think he should be higher ranked than he actually is because he's better than his rank. He's not unranked level at light heavyweight, okay? I thought he beat Khalil Roundtree. I think he's had a few fights where he's been that close but got dropped in certain rounds that have affected him. But in this fight, that didn't happen. He puts out Vitor Petrino, best performance of his, best KO of his career, best highlight of his career. He's beaten down Young. He's got good wins on his record and good finishes here and there. This is what I think is going to happen. Fuck, I can't remember his name. Mingyang Zhang. Mingyang Zhang Dangerous fighter, was on the Macau card of Yan versus Figueiredo not that long ago, so their schedules are going to work out. And he's coming off a big KO win over a guy that he KO'd on that card. I remember he has a win over... Mingyang Zhang has a win over Brenson Ribeiro. I do not remember the last guy that he KO'd, but I know it wasn't like a huge... I think it was like Ozzy Diaz or something like that. I want to say the guy's name was, just off the top of my head. I can't quite remember. I think it was just some guy that was there to get KO'd by him pretty much. He got a pretty good win. He got a performance bonus. I think Jacoby's going to be looking to stay active. He's getting up there in age. I think he's beyond 35 at this point, so we're pushing 40. And I think Dustin Jacoby, or Jacoby, for fuck's sake. You say Jacob. Why do you don't say Jacob, so why would it be Jacoby instead of Jacoby? It doesn't make... Either way, Americans. Dustin Jacoby, Mingyang Zhang, wherever they want to do it, we'll see what goes down. We'll see what goes down. Maybe on that February card in Australia or on the prelims somewhere, because I know, time zone-wise, Australia somewhat syncs up with China more than the rest of the world does, And that would bring their audience. And then Zhang Weili is going to be on that card defending her belt. So there's going to be a Chinese fan base watching. Maybe they get that on a quick turnaround as well. You never know. If Jacoby wants to take his 50K performance bonus and enjoy Christmas with his family, maybe they delay this for another time. But I think this is a potential chance at a matchup. 2-0 in the UFC. Seems like a promising prospect. This is his test to see if he's ready to get on to get a matchup against a top 15 ranked opponent. We move on. Daniel Marcos. Got a win over Adrian Yanez. Very close. A lot of Marcos fights are, but he seems to be just that tad bit better than his opponents, other than Davy Grant, who he robbed. I'd love to see Davy Grant versus Cody Garbrandt, by the way, on the UFC London card. I think that'd be a fun matchup that Davy deserves to open up the main card. Either way, he's not on the list because he's on the early prelims. Daniel Marcos versus Jonathan Martinez, I think is the matchup. Another victim of Davy Grant, who got slept by Davy Grant while Davy's here fighting some up-and-comers. Okay? Shouldn't even be lacing up gloves against him. There's no laces on the UFC. They shouldn't even be fucking Velcroing up against Davy Grant, okay? He's beaten him. He's beaten Daniel Marcos. He beat Adrian Yanez. I don't care what the decisions say. He's been robbed. Either way, though. Daniel Marcos, Jonathan Martinez. I think it makes sense. Jonathan Martinez coming off a loss recently to Marcus McGee where he didn't take too much damage, so maybe you want to be somewhat active. Maybe we'll see these dudes on a fight night card in April or March of next year, taking on each other. And this will be a chance for Daniel Marcos, if he wins, to get ranked in that 14-15 ranked spot. And for Jonathan Martinez, this will be a chance to bounce back and start looking towards the top 10 again. But he'd probably have to fight another guy first because he's not that big of a name. So Daniel Marcos, Jonathan Martinez. That's the matchup I want to see. Even though Daniel Marcos called out Jose Aldo, I want to see Jose Aldo versus Dominic Cruz. I think that's a no-brainer for a pay-per-view main card in the US somewhere in either March or April. So, yeah. Daniel Marcos, Jonathan Martinez. That's the matchup I think should happen. What's his name? Navajo Sterling. He won his fight. Not the best performance against Taco Tokos, but Tokos was tough. I so could have seen him going down to many body shots, but he toughed it out, made it to a decision. Navajo Sterling got a win, 3-rounder. Gonna want some time to develop still. You know what I mean? If he was smoking people, I'd be like, dude, get him back in there. But he went to a decision. Did he dominate? Yes. It was a good performance. Yes. But I'm looking at names like Dustin Stoltzfus next for Navajo Sterling. We need another one, you know? And I think he's going to win against Dustin Stoltzfus. And then we'll start talking about some names that you would maybe a casual fan would recognize more in the middleweight division. Then maybe it's time for the Meerschaert test. Because you don't want to just be chucking anyone in there against Gerald Meerschaert. You know what I mean? I don't think he's ready yet. That's all I'll say. So I think Navajo Sterling, Dustin Stoltzfus, maybe on the Saudi card alongside Adesanya, maybe in Australia. Who knows? That's the matchup I would make. Stoltzfus is coming off a KO win as well, so I can't remember who. But he's coming off a KO win somewhat recently. So Navajo Sterling, Dustin Stoltzfus. And then we'll start talking about some names that the casuals would recognize outside of the rankings for Navajo Sterling. He's still young in the game. You know what I mean? We move on. Sean Woodson got a win against Fernando Padilla. Very good win. TKO in the first round. Let's keep it active now, Woodson. You know, I think he's 7-1 now in the UFC on a 4-fight win streak as well. I think he has a no contest to Luis Saldana, which was basically a loss, but it was a finish by a legal knee after he got dropped twice beforehand, which is crazy to see what he's going on to do now in the featherweight division, to lose to a guy like Luis Saldana. No offense, but he's trash. Sean Woodson, coming off a win, 4 wins in a row. A lot of people talk about, when's Tabak going to get a top 15 ranked opponent? Oh, dude, he just won 2 fights in the Bantamweight division. You know? Let's give the guys who have put together a streak of unranked opponents their chance. And I think his chance should be against Giga Chikadze. I don't know where he is. He's probably injured. He hasn't fought in a very long time. But I think this is like a cool style matchup of 2 long-rangey strikers for the division. Sean Woodson, Giga Chikadze. Chikadze's coming off losses. Hadn't had the best history of fights recently. I think he fought Arnold Allen. That was his last fight, July of 2023, if I'm not mistaken. And he lost by a competitive decision, but Allen put that mustard on him. All good. Sean Woodson, Giga Chikadze. Quick turnaround, Sean. You know what I mean? I think they keep... You're forgettable. Even though that was a great win, and that wasn't a forgettable performance, maybe this time it won't be. But we've seen Woodson go to a decision 29-28 where he's won, and it's been like, by 3 months from now, everyone's forgot, and it's time for him to face another unranked guy coming off a loss. So, Sean Woodson, Giga Chikadze. Let's give Sean Woodson his chance, you know? As for Michael Johnson, great win over Ottoman Azaita. You know, Michael Johnson's actually put together some good wins in the lightweight division in the unranked section. So, you know, for Michael Johnson, next in his career, I mean, you could do a few things, but I wanted to take on someone who's got a name. And I think that this should be the matchup next for Michael Johnson.